Society, by and large, is not perfect. Doesn't matter where in the world you are, either, and chances are, if you're watching this video, there are worse places to be in the world than where you currently are. Because of this, however, over the years of people writing science fiction, there have been those who try to imagine a perfect world run by a perfect system. A world where the average citizen lives out their lives in relative peacefulness, without fear of things that, well, we worry about today in our societies. Today's show focuses on one of those possible futuristic utopias in the form of a police procedural. Because what better way to look at how a perfect system works than by looking at how it deals with its criminals? Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arcada, and welcome to Glass Reflection today. Psychopaths. Let's jam. In this futuristic version of Japan, a breakthrough has been made in technology that can accurately determine any person's mental state, their inclinations, and their aptitudes, leading to a society where your employment is determined by complex algorithms that decide what job would suit you best for the betterment of society. This system, known as the Sybil system, is also very good at determining various likelihoods that you would ever commit a crime. This is where the Ministry of Welfare's Public Safety Bureau comes in. Armed with the sophisticated weapons known as Dominators, inspectors of the MWPSB have the ability to directly connect with the Sybil system to determine its judgment of any specific individual. Sybil's algorithms determine the individual's psychological data, or psychopaths, and assign it a number. Have a high number and the inspectors can paralyze you and bring you in for recovery. If your psychopath is too high, however, you will be executed on the spot. In this world where criminals are either executed or removed from public eye, the story begins to focus on the eventual possibility of some criminals being able to bypass the system in some way, usually to commit murder. How does the system react? What measures does it have in place to deal with something like this? And are those people brought to some form of justice? This is what the show is about. Now, over time, the story turns into more of a self-deconstruction. Gen Urobuchi, the show's writer, is very well known for one of the more famous deconstruction animes of recent memory, being Madoka Magica. And this is similar, but instead of deconstructing an entire genre, Psychopath sets up the world that it wants you to view, telling you the ins and outs of it, and then proceeds to rip up the world from the roots to show you what's left after that. Now, this doesn't have the same impact as a traditional deconstruction. It's not like we're looking at the unwritten laws of the genre or anything, and really, in the fictional bubble where the story takes place, whatever the writer says goes, and we understand that. But I feel like this kind of deconstruction is a lot more difficult to do, and that's why I enjoyed it so much. Because a lot of effort has to be placed in the beginning, so that not only is the story interesting so that you watch it, but it also has to be fleshed out enough so that you can smash it to pieces later on. And Psychopaths does this by having a shit ton of unexplained mystery. A legal system that is apparently infallible? A system run by computers that determines the worth of any given citizen based on complicated calculations that the average citizen need not be worried about at all. Suspicious. Our primary characters are Akane Tsunemori and Shinya Kogami. Akane is an inspector, fresh on the job with little knowledge on how the MWPSB does its job. While shy and naive at first, she soon becomes a natural at doing her job, though she is constantly in conflict with the system's current view of justice, and tries to find another path that she can be comfortable with. Shinya Kogami is an enforcer. After being labeled as a latent criminal by the Sybil system, he has become nothing more than a watchdog for the police. The mentality of why they have enforcers in the first place is similar to the old saying, to catch a criminal, you have to think like one. So the MWPSB employs several criminals to do the more dirty jobs in an attempt to save the mental health of their inspectors, though that doesn't always work. Kogami used to be an inspector himself until he became so immersed in a particular case that his psychopaths rose too high and was deemed unrecoverable. One of the driving forces of the show is Akane and Kogami's different worldviews, both on justice and how the system should be run based on their own individual experiences. In that regard, the story is paced really well, and it gives them a villain that they both want to apprehend, though for different reasons and in different ways. As for the secondary characters, the other enforcers specifically, I wish that they were able to get more fleshed out. Out of the 4 existing enforcers, we have Shinya Kogami, who is more or less our main character, Tomomi Masuoka, an old-style cop who admittedly gets decent screen time for what he is, but then we have Yayoi, a former musician who only gets 1 episode to explain her backstory, and Shizuse, who doesn't even get that. Thing is, I think their stories, based on the small amount we already get, would have been rather fascinating to know more about. Yayoi got labeled as a latent criminal after spending too much time around other musicians who were not quote-unquote approved by the Sybil system, therefore darkening her hue. Kagari got labeled as a latent criminal at age 5 and has more or less been locked up and observed since then. Think about that for a second. You are labeled as a criminal since you were 5. Like, how does that affect a person? He seems carefree in most of his interactions, but is there something more? We will never find out, and that's the kind of thing that I find disheartening. At the same time, though, I can't really fault it, because it's not like what we got was lacking in any way. The psychological look into the utopian world and the people who occupy it, at least in relation to the main story, is extremely well done. It's just that I really wish we got to see more of the background window dressing, because it is teased to the point where you get interested, but then it's just sort of left hanging there. The general look of the show is fairly generic, though I am bothered on occasion by the placement of Akane's eyelashes. It's a silly thing, I know, but I just get this feeling that they are on the side of her eye when they should be on the top or the bottom. Either way, the look is somewhat generic. The actual animation quality, however, is rather impressive. The animation was done by science fiction favorite Production IG, and they did what they do best. They made a futuristic society look appealing, with some very good choreography and timely camera angles for just the right amount of impact. There was nothing that stood out as extraordinary about it, but it didn't need to be. It does its job, and in a fashion to which I expected it to be done. Now, what I liked about the music is how it doesn't stick to just one style, or even just using traditional styles considering its setting. It uses the best kind of music to fit the scene, be that by using classical music, or, in some cases, techno. It allows the scene to dictate the kind of music, rather than having the music influence the tone of the show throughout. The opening and ending sequences are interesting to me, mainly because generally when I like the opening, I find the ending lacking, and vice versa. The first ED goes far beyond the traditional panning shots or character designs, allowing Production IG's effects department to have some fun. It also has a backing track that just adds to the whole thing. Now, the second OP makes us try to forget that at the show's core, it's not about the future tech, but rather about fighting for justice, which is how the series starts to focus by that point. Both are entertaining to watch and fitting. Now, the dub, as to be expected from Funimation, is top-notch, without having them rely too much on their old favorite actors and actresses, a feat which I am quite impressed by. I particularly very much enjoy the performance of Alex Organ, who played the lead villain of the show Shogo. I'd never heard this man's voice before Psycho-Pass, and I hope that this will not be the last time that I do so. I can't say that Psycho-Pass is a bad series, because it's not. Hell, I even regret putting those words into a sentence in case my meaning is ever screwed later on. But here's the thing I feel about it. As grandiose as this world is, at the end of the day, I feel like it was somewhat unremarkable. Sure, the animation was solid, the pacing was amazing, the characters were interesting, etc. But in my mind, when I compare it to other sci-fi shows like Ghost in the Shell or Ergo Proxy, I feel like it's more like watching a fireworks show on YouTube, rather than being there in person. Like, it's great, and you can sure as hell see the quality in it, but ultimately it feels like more of a preview of the world, rather than a true experience of the world itself. And so, with all that in mind, I've meticulously calculated values for the categories of story, characters, animation, sound, and my own personal enjoyment, which after having the Sybil system determine the rest of the score for me, but Realizing that reviewing itself is a conflict of interest and therefore biased, I then did all the calculations myself, which has me awarding Psycho-Pass with an overall score of a solid 8 out of 10, and recommending that you buy it rather than stream. While it may only be a preview into the world that it presents, that does not mean it is any less juicy as a piece of entertainment, which, of course, should be enjoyed at your leisure. The only thing that might give someone pause, however, is the existence of a re-airing of the show in preparation for the second season to be released in fall of 2014. Now, the re-airing takes this 22-episode series and turns it into an 11-episode one with an hour-long running length instead of the traditional 25. While it does contain some new scenes to it, I do wonder if that makes it worth waiting to see if Funimation ever decides to dub that version. So really, it's up to you if you want to watch the re-aired version or watch this version. It probably doesn't make that much of a difference. Speaking of Funimation dubbing, at the time of this video, Psycho-Pass has been licensed and is available from Funimation Entertainment on DVD, Blu-ray, and their streaming website if you happen to have access to any of those things. For alternate anime recommendations, I point you towards the obvious Ghost in the Shell for its similar take on police procedural in a technologically advanced society, but also Ergo Proxy for its view on a utopia that is not as perfect as the average citizen thinks it is, and the struggle to find the truth behind it. Between those two, you should find something to your liking. And that's it from me. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, follow me on Twitter if you feel so inclined, and until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.